Give me a second. Let me think about this.
No, don't. No thinking.
All right.
Not
You open
allowed.
them.
No, we should call this no thinking allowed.
No thinking allowed.
Okay, the US elections. Now you are a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, a wolf in sheep's clothing. You were fully supporting Kamala. You thought that there was no candidate better that you had ever seen in the entire world until you saw Kamala Harris. And then she lost the easiest election ever to Donald Trump. How did that make you feel? How did that make you feel?
I mean, do I think that she was the best candidate ever? No, not at all. I think she's the best candidate that they could have put up in 2 months, right? Which is what they had. They had 2 months from when Biden dropped out to the election to kind of figure out who the hell are we going to put up here.
And
right?
how do you think Biden is feeling about that now? I was thinking about that the other day.
Biden should feel bad, not for dropping out 2 months ago, but for not dropping out 4 years ago. Right? He should have dropped out 4 years ago when he was 111 years old, and then maybe we wouldn't have been in this tragic situation.
Do you
now.
think he would have lost worse than Kamala?
I think he would have been trounced.
I agree.
He would have absolutely been trounced. He couldn't string two coherent thoughts together, right?
And neither could Kamala.
And we're talking about it in comparison to Trump, who has trouble with the third thought, right? So it's
Okay,
it's a bit of a mixed
I will
bag here.
say there were 2 times when I thought Trump is definitely going to win the election. And I was there for the 6 weeks before the election as well. So I kind of got to see what actual people were thinking there. The first time was when the assassination attempt, and the next day front page was him coming out saying, fight, fight, fight.
Sure,
I was
his
like, he's
gruesome
definitely going to win.
assassination attempt where he lost like 1/3 of a year.
Please
or
don't tell
something.
me you think it's staged.
Not at all. I mean, I'm sure it happened. Do I think that he was so wounded that he had to wear that crazy-looking bandage covering half his
He got
face?
shot.
My God.
The man got shot. Okay, and the second time was when I saw him on Joe Rogan.
Okay.
I watched the full podcast.
Sure.
And he is incredibly, say what you will about him, incredibly authentic guy, right? And he's funny. Like you would want to be in a lift with him.
He is. I'll give you this. He is authentic in his inauthenticness, right? That he is so committed to being inauthentic that it comes off as authentic.
No, what do you mean? Because even when he says a lie, you know he fully believes it. He's not lying to lie.
The man is a bona fide con artist.
I don't
that has
know.
been elected twice now.
Yes. So what does that tell you?
It tells me that they're okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk seriously about it, right? So, I think the primary issue here in this election, right, was of course that it was really basic, boiled down to things are too expensive, and they weren't so
Massively.
expensive under Trump.
Yeah.
And that was basically the only issue that people voted on. I think.
In COVID, prices had really gone up, and I was shocked by how expensive the US is.
So the
For
question,
like basic meals, honestly.
the question becomes: were the Democrats responsible for that increase in pricing of everyday goods? Right?
Was their campaign focused on bringing that back to people,
wasn't. It
giving a
wasn't.
disposable income? You had Kamala Harris spewing word salad every time. I don't think basing it on identity politics and really nothing else.
I think that's rich, though, talking about word salad in comparison to Trump, right?
I think he made sense.
He
I
only
think he had
has word
coherent.
salad.
I don't agree, though. I think he had more coherent messaging, which was to speak to you economically and be like, your country is really going to pot, and I'm going to make America great again.
Sure,
and
but
hers
that was
was
his-
America was always keep America great. It doesn't work,
That was his message in 2016 as well, right?
and it worked then.
But I'm saying that's not an authentic. That's just he has a. I don't know how you would qualify it, right? But there is this deep inferiority complex built into him that everything is bad, everything has gone wrong, and that we need to fix it. This is just such a vague message, right? This is the hiding place of fascists, essentially. That everything before me was bad, and I alone will make it better. And that's such a bland message if you get down to it, right?
And yet resonated so deeply.
Sure, people are
I
bland,
think that this is
generally
what
bland.
no, I think this is the liberal issue, right? That you equate populism with fascism. Populism to me means the elites don't like you. And I think that you need populism. I think populism is good, actually.
So here's my take on populism, right? And maybe your working definition of it is different, right? I think populism is where, as an example, the people want something and you agree with that despite whatever rational evidence there may be against that. As an example, right? The lowering, we did this in Pakistan, right? Where Imran Khan, near the tail end of his premiership, reduced or subsidized the prices of petrol for everyone.
Right.
That was popular. There was no economic rationale behind it. In fact, it crippled us for the next 2-3 years.
Agreed.
Right? So that is when I'm talking about populist policies, that's what I'm talking about. That is my definition of populism.
Which is populism for populism's sake, but not grounded in any rationality.
Not grounded in any real, and it can be, right? It is not that the people are inherently incapable of having rational thoughts. It's just that they're not always having rational thoughts. And that's why we have a representative democracy in most places, right? Where we kind of, let's say, outsource the thinking part of that to these people who we've ostensibly chosen to do this job, right?
I think, honestly, you reflect so many of the Democrats that I met while I was there and their elite condescension. Which is, the population knows what they want some of the time, but the rest of the time we've got to tell them. Which is fine. Which is fine if that's your approach, but it just lost you an election.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah.
It did lose us an election,
and it lost you an election among the communities you were trying to help.
I'm Pakistani, so clearly I have no particular stake here. But
I mean, they're very important elections. They affect all of us, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, Aisha, again, it is that the main issue is not that the Democrats' message didn't resound. It's that who the hell is this lady who's she was a do-nothing vice president for 4 years. She didn't really accomplish a lot. And then suddenly you're casting her in the role of, essentially, you're saying, here's Obama 2.0. She is not that.
Completely.
Right? So would the Democrats, if they had gone through a proper vetting process, gone through a proper primary process, arrived
being
at a candidate?
Democratic. The Democratic Party is not democratic at all.
Sure. So we can argue over their failures all day, right? Like I'm a dyed-in-the-wool liberal. I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. I think there is a distinction to be drawn there, right? So I think that's my take on it. Given enough time, they could have come up with a better candidate. I think the policies could have resonated, right?
Yeah.
They could have focused on cost of living more, and should have probably focused on it more. And that was a mistake. That was like an electoral, it was this electoral calculus that they missed out on. And that's why they lost this election. They clearly lost, right?
And I think the immigration issue was huge. I think mostly it was the economic issue.
Sure.
We'll talk about foreign policy too, but I think foreign policy only played a role as far as economics go, in the sense that we shouldn't be spending money abroad that we should be spent here.
As far as the tariffs go, that's as far as I think foreign policy figured into it, right?
Yeah. And I think it was really interesting that you had all of this talk about how he had a comedian come up and say there's a pile of garbage floating in the Pacific Ocean.
About Puerto Rico, right?
About Puerto Rico. And then Puerto Ricans came out 30% higher in favor of Trump.
Hispanic men the majority voted for Trump.
Yeah,
right?
which is, maybe it's a solely American immigration issue, which is that once you've come into the country, you pull the ladder up behind you and you're like, I don't want anyone else like me to come in, which is fine. But I don't disagree with a Democrat. The Democratic Party is not leftist, but say Bernie Sanders, who I would have, the only person in America who I would have supported, if he had come in and he said, I'm going to close the borders, actually, I think that's a completely fine policy. And what does your liberalism say about that?
I mean, I think there's obviously two aspects to it, right? There's of course the social liberalism that I deeply espouse, but on the same, I think I'm also like a classic economic liberalist as well. So I enjoy the fact that there is a free movement of goods and free movement of people.
Right.
I think it makes everyone overall in the aggregate better off. Does it make Joe Schmo in Kentucky better off? Probably not, right? Or in the Rust Belt or in the Appalachian Mountains? Maybe not. But as a whole, it makes the American people and it makes us as Pakistanis better off. That's my take on it.
I don't think it does, because I think that it's the race to the bottom in terms of prices to give to the wealthy cosmopolitan elites in the West. And so the poor people in both countries are worse off. So the poor Mexicans are worse off because you have this free trade, which you favor. I inherently am incredibly opposed to that. I'm opposed to austerity. I'm opposed to deregulation. I'm in favor of a welfare state which looks after its people. And if that comes at the cost of closed borders, no freedom of movement of goods, also bring manufacturing back. That I think I'm in favor of that. So actually,
I think Aisha, if we were to look at the American track record, right? Since we can go further back, but let's say Reagan, right? Americans are objectively better off now than they were back then, and that is, forget about the deregulation. Clearly, deregulation comes with its own set of consequences, right? And to borrow a Republican term for now, soft touch regulation, right, where you allow the market for the most part with adequate guardrails to operate on its own. I think that's not a bad call, and it hasn't resulted in a net loss for the U.S. The U.S. is better off. Every single individual there is better off than their grandparents were. And
I don't think that's true. I actually don't think that's true, because I think that better off in terms of the world generally is better off in terms of like pushing out of poverty.
They have more money. Each one of them
but they can't
individually
afford
has more money.
But the cost of houses, the cost of like having as good a life as like the boomer generation, I'm never going to make as much money as my parents did.
The things that you are buying have changed, right? So you're buying a different product now than you are then. Calorically, I mean, it's it's obvious on the face of it, right? Obesity rates have skyrocketed in the U.S. What is that really a measure of, right? There is just so much goddamn food. Everyone has food. Yeah. Everyone has an excess of food, of the basic foodstuffs that we need to live.
And bad food.
Maybe. We're not arguing over the rest of it, but we're just saying if we were to break it down, right, and say that, are we better? And if we were to define it really narrowly and say that, is there, for example, malnutrition in the U.S., right? Yes. Is it at the rate that it was 40, 50 years ago? Absolutely not. It's magnitudes better. Healthcare better. You have we're not so far off from when an infection in your leg resulted in you chopping off that leg.
Yeah, but those are developments in science too.
Sure.
Yeah. So my argument is that fine, in terms of what you call free trade, what I see is, again, my friend put it aptly when she came back from the US, you have a dictatorship by corporations. And when you look at Big Pharma, you don't have deregulation, or maybe you have deregulation and that has led to monopolies. And I think that monopolies are essentially bad for competition. No? How does that go in favor of your liberalism?
Dictatorship by corporation, that's an interesting term. Who is Elon Musk to Trump? Why is he there?
And
is it because he has he has a track record of public policy behind him? What is his main reason for being there?
He's rich.
He's rich.
Yeah.
Right. So this is not this critique of yours is a critique generally of American politics. It's not
of American culture.
Of American
the
culture.
American dream is based on that.
So
right?
this is not specific to the Democrats. Yeah, the Democrats are bought up. You know, they're in big pharmas or big corporate pocket, right? But Trump is that exactly, and in fact, he is that.
I think. Yes and no. He pretends not to be.
But he is that.
But he is, yes. Have the elites come together and try to stop him from getting into power? Yes, because he's so volatile, we don't actually know what he'll do, right? Things like free trade are a bipartisan issue. He came in, he was like, I'm going to get rid of NAFTA. I think it's bad for us.
Sure.
That's something which is an issue. Even foreign policy-wise, when you look at it, Israel-Palestine, he's definitely going to be worse on because his son-in-law is Jared Kushner. His Kushner plan for Palestine was terrible. It showed like a complete Bantustanization of Palestine.
Sure.
He has another son-in-law who's half Lebanese, and who apparently helped to court away the Arab American vote in Michigan. But I don't know if he's going to have any impact on policy there. He has come out very anti-Zelensky and very pro-Trump, right? So you have all of these American arms being flooded into Ukraine, and he has said, I'm going to end that war. And it's an incredibly popular sentiment in the US. And I think that it goes against BLOB, which is this military establishment, which is the foreign policy establishment, so coined by Obama. And I wonder, is he going to be able to see any of these policies through? But you have a ringing endorsement from the American people that they want to see those through. right? He's promised to be isolationist foreign policy-wise, protectionist domestic economic policy-wise. And this, again, goes against Reaganomics, but they are very much supported. The Democratic position is not.
So I think we're conflating issues here, right? So we can either say that Trump was mostly elected on this cost of living crisis, right?
Yeah.
Or we can say that it was his foreign policy aims. But this is now we're just guessing, right? Because
I honestly think Gaza was a non-issue.
I think Gaza was an absolute non-issue. I think anyone who thought it was going to be an issue was deluding themselves.
Perhaps only in Michigan.
Perhaps only in Michigan. But even then, I think it was mostly just it was shouting into the void, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It didn't result in really anything, right? Apart from maybe shifting sentiment away from a party that actually perhaps had the, had the priorities of the Muslims living in Dearborn and living in Michigan in mind. Because Trump doesn't give a shit, right?
Yeah.
He does not care.
Yeah.
And they can look forward to 4 years of getting ignored, and then we'll see what happens with Gaza.
I agree to not reward the Democratic Party for Gaza and to be like lesser of two evils. I don't agree with that.
So you think they should have voted the stance they took, which was voting for this nothing lady? What was
Jill
her name?
Stein. 100%. I would have done the same. I wouldn't have been able to vote for Kamala. Yeah, and I resent the notion that I should support her because she's a woman. And I think coming from South Asia, we're so past that.
You don't support her because she's a woman. I think you support her because apart from this one thing, 99% of your problems are resolved by their platform and ignored by...
I don't agree. They help the elite. You've got greater inequality. And, every time I was there, people kept on saying it's very easy in America to make money if you work hard. And it's like, when you look at the facts, like you're so sold on this Kool-Aid of the American dream. But when you look at the facts, social mobility is so much harder to achieve in America compared to any other country in the Western world. There's a reason for that.
Okay, so America is, of course, and always has been a land of extremes, right? Where you perhaps it is harder to move out. I can't speak to this because I don't have the facts at my fingertips. But I think by that same metric, it's also the place where you are most likely able to move out of whatever your particular social class is to begin with, right? Like it may be harder, but you have the capacity to go from being nothing to being a billionaire, let's say.
I kept on hearing that.
I'm not sure I see so many Finnish billionaires emerging or Swedish billionaires emerging, right? But we know that this can and does happen in the U.S., right? If not billionaires, clearly that's a rarefied sort of crowd. Maybe at least a millionaire, right? Being wealthy for yours and the next generation.
I mean, in terms
perhaps.
of like Jewish and Hungarian immigrants, have done incredibly well in the U.S.
Sure.
Yeah.
Pakistani immigrants do incredibly well in the U.S. as well.
Indians do.
All of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're well above median wages. They're doing well. And that could be, that's a whole nother discussion about brain drain from Pakistan.
Yeah.
They're taking our best people and so on.
100%.
Let's not, we shouldn't get into that maybe. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, Gaza was an absolute non-issue for this entire process.
And I think you see that in how many votes did Jill Stein get in Michigan?
Nothing.
It was not much. So I was like, okay, so the ones that they either went for her or they went for Trump, but altogether that's not many people. Most people probably stayed at home because of Gaza, maybe.
So I think I said this in conversation with Oves earlier on a different podcast, which was that Americans as a whole almost only ever vote on domestic issues, right? That's the only thing that's really relevant. Everything else is just bullshit, right? It doesn't figure into the day-to-day. It's just as I don't vote on Kashmir in my domestic politics. They don't vote on Palestine in their domestic politics.
But I do wonder, okay, you're voting based on what you have in your pocket, right? And the Democratic messaging was that, you're doing fine, actually. The economy is actually better, and fine, there's inflation, but you also have higher wages. That's not going to speak to your Uber driver. That's not going to speak to your delivery driver or your blue collar worker in Appalachian territory. They're going to be like, I feel like I can't make ends meet. Sure. And I think that even when you look at Kamala and her like message discipline, was saying, have you seen those videos of her saying the same thing again and again and again? And then you ask Trump, and Trump's like, "Oh, I just go and speak."
So I mean, this is a failure of the state, right? That they have not been able to adequately address the concerns of blue collar workers across the
And
country.
telling people the economy is good when they don't feel it is not working.
And I mean, you know, like where that might be true, yes, the economy is better. But obviously, again, it doesn't matter to the individual, right?
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
economy is better. I'm not doing well. And therefore, I don't care that in aggregate wages have gone up or
Yes,
in aggregate
exactly.
there's more money around.
Yeah.
I'm not doing well.
Yeah.
So could they have done more to resolve that concern? Yeah, every American administration ever could have done more to resolve that concern ever since we started this outsourcing experiment, right? Like,
Yeah.
it should have been, I mean, 20 years ago, these people should have been retrained into different industries that the U.S. does
Yeah.
support. That didn't happen, right? So is it okay to blame the Democrats for that entire thing? I don't think that's fair. But is it okay to blame them for not doing anything specifically right now about it? Sure. Just as we'll blame Trump if and when he doesn't do it, right?
Yeah. Okay, as a dyed-in-the-wool liberal,
Yeah.
what do you want from the Democratic Party going forward? Like, what would you like to see?
Yeah, so I'd like to see a return to. I mean, I generally I'm with the social liberalism. I want to see us return to economic liberalism as well. I think Biden is he's essentially taken this protectionist sort of agenda that we would ordinarily associate with left-wing governments elsewhere, right?
Yep.
And I think that has never been America, and it cannot be. You cannot be the creative engine of the world and be the leading light that everyone else is supposed to follow, and at the same time close yourself off. You can't have industries only be in America. You've created this world order that is built on these alliances that spread across the world. And if you don't take care of them, they're going to fall apart. And then I don't know where we are anymore, right? Who holds everyone in check?
Oh, really? You subscribe to the notion that they should be the world's policemen?
I think they are the world's policemen. It's not a do I subscribe to the notion that they should be? They are, right? This is a fact that we live with. And
Yeah.
I am in favor of, as I think everyone should be, right? Who's living a moderately okay life. I'm in favor of the status quo because it maintains me. Just as the guy in Kentucky is in favor of himself, I'm in favor of myself, and I'm doing okay. You're doing okay. Our cameraman over there is doing okay.
So
We're all beneficiaries of this world order.
I disagree with them with maintaining the status quo. I think that the status quo is changing. I think that the rise of China is going to be definitely something that they have to deal with. I also feel that, and I said this before the election results came out, that if he wins, it's bad for America. If she wins, it's bad for America. Because I think that a lot of people were also saying that if she becomes president, it's like, when when a company is like going down and they elect like a brown female CEO, at that point, that's what I thought that her coming into power would kind of, would be a harbinger of for the US. But I'm really not in favor of looking up to the US in any way. And I think given they're co-authoring this genocide in Gaza, I think that's more, something that the global South is looking to more than ever. But I'm in favor of an isolationist America. I'm in favor of one that's out of Ukraine and that leaves Ukraine to it because, it's great to have Ukrainians die on the altar of your great power politics when you're not dying. But it's very easy to send them arms when they're losing the war, but that should be ended. And the Democrats would prolong the war because they enjoy doing that, whereas Trump seems to be on the right side of that, where he wants to bring that to an end. I feel like he will be devastatingly bad for Gaza. And I think that his cabinet picks so far kind of show us that he's going to be bad for that. And I hope I'm wrong on that front. But
Do you
in
think
terms
he will be,
of
though?
the fact that he is going to have a stronger stance against Netanyahu. He had a very horrible, in the Joe Rogan podcast, he was saying horrible things about Iran and he was saying horrible things about Hamas and very, very pro-Israel. But in the past, he's also said stuff about how Netanyahu has to stop, look at the college campuses. So he's such a businessman. He's really aware of the optics, which I think that the Democrats kind of were too weak to deal with, especially Joe Biden. Perhaps he'll be stronger on that front. I doubt it, though. I doubt it, given the people, the loyalists that he's kept around him.
Sure.
So I'm waiting to see how it is on that front. But I think you come at this from a liberal standpoint. I honestly don't know where I fall now. I think I have very socially conservative views, and I perhaps have Keynesian economic views. But then I'm driven by a counter hegemonic ideal for the world, which doesn't see the US in any exalted position.
Sure. I mean, and that's fair. I mean, I think forgetting about Trump for now, right? Like, I think the best path forward would have been where if we could have maintained the institutions that were created post World War II, with maybe new emerging powers like China taking the lead and expanding on that project, right? That would have been my ideal take on that. That okay, maybe the U.S. is on the decline, and then we have another, let's say, hegemon come take its place, right? But maintain that kind of framework where you have at least ostensibly, equal sovereignty between states, right? But I feel like China's not on the same team as me anymore, right? They
Really?
have their own vision of the world, which is fair. Again, they can have their own vision of the world, but is that one where smaller countries, maybe less important countries like Pakistan, come out looking rosy? Yeah, as long as we agree 100% on everything, sure. But as soon as we have even a tiny bit of a disagreement, I think maybe we'll see ourselves blockaded off or something, right? Much like what China's doing currently in the South China Sea, right? Something akin to that for Pakistan. So I think it's and of course Trump thrives in these kind of environments, right, where there are no rules, where he can just say whatever he wants. Because again, my basic point was, this is a man, like when we talk about the Democrats, right, we can say, and I've said this before, that they have ideals that they have failed to live up to.
Yep.
Right? When we talk about Trump, he has no ideals. He is everything to everyone, and he's the world's biggest villain to some people, and he is the knight in shining armor for others. But he himself will believe anything and nothing at the same time, and that's where I think I'll call it.
Let's end it on that note.
Let's end it on that note.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you.